Hey, welcome back. Today, we're picking up right where we left off in our Minecraft world. And I've got some more Reddit stories to keep us company along the way. I hope these videos can be a cozy little space for you to relax, whether you're studying, working, or maybe even falling asleep. So get comfortable and come hang out with me for a while. And if you end up enjoying the video, feel free to leave a like or subscribe. There's absolutely no pressure, but it really does help more than you'd think. All right, let's get into the first story. It's about a person who spent more than a week being told there was absolutely nothing their bank could do. Then they copied 15 important-looking employees into a single email, and somehow the problem was fixed 9 minutes later. It all started when the author accidentally placed the same online order twice. The payment page had loaded strangely, making it look like their first payment hadn't gone through, even though it actually had. As soon as they realized what had happened, they contacted the merchant, who canceled one of the payments right away. But the money never returned to their account. Instead, it remained marked as on hold for more than a week, over 5 full business days. So the original poster called their bank to find out what was going on. The woman they spoke to claimed that the merchant was still holding the money and that the hold wouldn't expire until July 31st. According to her, there was absolutely nothing the bank could do about it. Naturally, they contacted the merchant next. The merchant was actually very helpful and confirmed that the duplicate payment had already been canceled. They also had no idea where the bank had gotten the July 31st date from. As far as they were concerned, they were no longer holding the money at all. With that information, the original poster tried calling the bank again. They called 4 times before the front desk finally answered. They were transferred back to the same woman who had originally said nothing could be done, and she immediately sent them to voicemail. So they found her direct number on the bank's website and tried calling that instead. They were sent to voicemail again. And honestly, after 4 phone calls and 2 voicemails, I think most people would be running out of patience. The author sat there for a moment and then made a decision. They went through the bank's website and copied the email address of every person whose job title sounded even slightly important. Managers, account supervisors, along with the employees who had been ignoring their calls and telling them that nothing could be done. 15 people in total. They explained the entire situation, attached a screenshot showing all of their outgoing calls, and sent the email at exactly 11:36 in the morning. At 11:45, just 9 minutes later, the same woman from the bank emailed them back. She said they had checked the account again. And this time the system had somehow allowed them to remove the hold. The money was released, and the problem was suddenly completely resolved. Funny how something can be impossible for more than a week, right up until 15 important people are included in the conversation. I think that might be one of my favorite kinds of customer service magic. Several phone calls, nothing they can do. 2 voicemails, still impossible. 1 email copied to management, suddenly the system is feeling very cooperative. The original poster said they were already slowly cutting ties with that bank, and honestly, I really can't blame them. Sometimes the problem isn't that nobody can help you, it's that nobody feels like helping until the right people are watching. Anyway, at least they have finally got their money back. Let's move on to the next story. This one is honestly kind of wild. A group of friends decided to stage an actual intervention because they were uncomfortable with someone's birth name. And somehow, when she explained that the name was connected to her own heritage, they decided that still wasn't good enough. The person who wrote this is 21, and her name is Moonshadow. That's her real name. It's the name on her birth certificate, and she says it was inspired by a Cat Stevens song that her mom really loved. She's always gotten questions about it, which probably isn't too surprising. When she was younger, some of her teachers even shortened it to Moon, mostly because they said it was easier to remember. But now that she's an adult, people don't really comment on it as much. And honestly, to her, it's just her name. She'd never thought of it as something that needed explaining or defending. Her friends had never seemed bothered by it either, or at least that's what she thought. One day, they were all supposed to meet at a restaurant, and when she arrived, the whole group was already there waiting for her. They sat her down and told her that this was an intervention about her name. Apparently, they decided that she needed to start introducing herself by something else because using the name Moonshadow made them uncomfortable. She obviously asked them why, and they told her that her name sounded Native American. So by continuing to use it, she was appropriating Native culture, which would already be a pretty strange thing to say to someone about the name their parents gave them. But there was another problem with their argument. She's Cherokee. She pointed that out, and instead of apologizing or reconsidering what they'd said, her friends told her that she didn't act Cherokee. So apparently it didn't count. At that point, she was irritated, embarrassed, and completely caught off guard. She snapped and told them she wasn't changing her name just because they were being racist. Looking back, she admitted that calling them racist might have been harsh in the moment, but she was angry, and the entire situation had been dropped on her without any warning, so she left the restaurant. Afterward, her phone started blowing up with messages from the group, and even from people who hadn't been there, telling her that she was a bad friend and that she wasn't respecting their boundaries. I'm sorry, but asking someone to stop using their own birth name isn't really a personal boundary. A boundary is about what you choose to do. It isn't a rule where everyone around you has to change their identity to keep you comfortable. And the fact that they arranged an intervention before even having a normal conversation with her makes the whole thing feel so much worse. The story got a lot more attention than she expected, and after reading the responses, she added some more context. She explained again that Moonshadow wasn't a nickname she'd randomly chosen. It was her legal name given to her by her parents, and it had a personal connection to her mother. She also clarified that she's half Cherokee and half white, although she says she looks fairly white. A lot of people told her to leave the friend group entirely, but she was hesitant because she'd known these people since high school. They'd been part of her life for years, and she didn't want to throw all of that away without at least trying to talk to them one more time. So she arranged another meeting with the group. When she arrived, the atmosphere was tense. Everyone was quiet, and nobody seemed to know how to start. She eventually told them that she wasn't going to change her name and asked why they thought it was appropriate to demand that from her in the first place. There was a lot of arguing back and forth, and for a while they were basically repeating the same things they'd already said. But then one of the friends, she calls her Cam in the post, completely blew up at her. And that's when it became pretty clear that this wasn't only about the name. Cam started listing all kinds of problems she apparently had with her. She complained about how the poster talked about her heritage, how she talked about her disabilities, and even the way she dressed. She said she didn't like how much the poster had changed over the years. Then she accused her of being selfish, of thinking she was better than everyone else, and of making the entire group uncomfortable. So, yeah, that's a lot to unload during a conversation that was supposedly just about someone's name. After arguing for a while longer, she realized there probably wasn't anything left to fix. She left the meeting and later sent a message to the group chat saying that she was done. She told them not to contact her again. Some of them responded with pretty nasty messages, so she ended up blocking them. She admitted that cutting them off still hurt. They'd been her friends for years, and even when you know you've made the right decision, losing that many people at once is going to feel awful. But she also said she has other friends outside of that group, so at least she isn't completely alone. Okay, so I would definitely say the author is not an a-hole. I think the second meeting confirmed that this was never really about protecting anyone's culture. The name was just the thing they chose to focus on. Once Cam started bringing up her clothes, her disabilities, her personality, and how much she'd changed, it sounded more like they simply didn't like the person she was becoming. And instead of accepting that friendships sometimes change, they turned it into a group intervention and made her feel like something was wrong with her identity. I do understand why she went back to speak to them one more time, though. When you've known people since high school, it's hard to just walk away without wondering whether the situation could still be repaired. But after that conversation, I think she made the right call. I'm curious what you think, though. Was there any way this friendship could have been saved? Or had the group already gone way too far? Anyway, let's move on to the next story. Am I the a-hole for refusing to follow my friend's parents' house rules and leaving? The woman who wrote this is 22 and her boyfriend is 23. They've been together since high school, almost 6 years, and they recently moved in together after she graduated. They aren't officially engaged yet, but they're planning to get married once he finishes grad school. So while they might not have a marriage certificate, this isn't exactly a new or casual relationship. An old friend from high school invited both of them to spend a holiday weekend at his family's beach house. When they arrived on Friday, they realized that his parents were going to be staying there for the weekend too. That wasn't a problem. It was their house after all, and everyone seemed to be getting along really well. The parents were happy to let them do their own thing during the day, and that evening, everyone had drinks together in the hot tub. So far, the weekend seemed completely normal. But later that night, while the couple was getting ready for bed, the friend's mother pulled the woman aside. She explained that because the couple wasn't married, they wouldn't be allowed to sleep in the same room. The woman would be staying in the guest room, while her boyfriend would have to sleep on the couch in the living room. This came as a surprise because their friend hadn't mentioned the rule before they arrived. And obviously, the couple already lived together. She didn't argue with the mother. She just said, okay, even though the whole situation made her feel pretty uncomfortable. She has trouble sleeping in unfamiliar places, and sleeping next to her boyfriend usually makes that easier. Her boyfriend also wasn't thrilled about spending the next 2 nights on an uncomfortable couch when there was a perfectly good bed available, so they talked about it privately and came up with what seemed like a simple solution. They'd get a hotel room in town, sleep there, and meet up with their friend again the next morning. And honestly, that seems completely reasonable to me. They didn't ignore the house rule. They didn't sneak into the same room after everyone went to sleep. They just decided that the sleeping arrangement didn't work for them, so they stayed somewhere else. When they told their friend about the plan, he acted a little weird about it, but eventually said it was fine. So the couple left, checked into a hotel, and assumed they'd all continue the weekend as planned the next day. But the next morning, when they called to ask what time their friend wanted to meet up, his attitude had completely changed. He told them that he couldn't hang out anymore. Apparently, his parents had been furious with him for allowing the couple to leave and stay at a hotel. They said the couple had rejected their hospitality and made the whole situation into a much bigger issue than it needed to be. So now, even though the couple had technically done exactly what the parents asked, everyone was upset with them anyway. At that point, the couple stopped trying to salvage the original plans. They spent the rest of the weekend doing their own thing and didn't see their friend again. Then, on Monday, he sent another message. He said he was really angry that they couldn't just sleep apart for 2 nights to keep his parents happy. And as punishment, he told them they wouldn't be invited to Friendsgiving that year, an event he normally hosted for their entire high school friend group. Which feels like a surprisingly dramatic consequence for booking a hotel room. I think the parents were completely within their rights to decide who could share a room in their home, but the couple was also completely within their rights to say, okay, then we'll sleep somewhere else. A house rule doesn't mean your guests are required to stay in the house, no matter how uncomfortable the arrangement makes them. They respected the rule, they didn't create a scene, and they didn't demand that the parents change their beliefs. They quietly paid for their own hotel and still planned to spend the rest of the weekend with everyone. The stranger part is that the friend apparently knew about his parents' expectations and never warned them before the trip. That's something you mentioned before. Your guests pack their bags and travel to the beach house, not while they're getting ready for bed. Honestly, I don't think the parents were only upset about the sleeping arrangements. I think they expected the couple to accept the rule without questioning it, and leaving for a hotel made them feel like their authority had been rejected. But choosing different accommodation isn't disrespectful. You can respect someone's right to set a boundary in their own home without agreeing to remain there. And threatening to exclude them from a yearly friend group tradition afterwards just makes the whole reaction feel even more controlling. So, no, I really don't think the couple did anything wrong here. The hosts set their rule, the couple followed it, and everyone could have continued the weekend normally the next morning. The conflict only happened because the family apparently wanted the rule to control what the couple did outside of the house, too. But I'm curious what you think. Was leaving for a hotel disrespectful, or was it the most reasonable solution available? Anyway, let's move on to the next story. This one involves an exhausting group project, a very long-held grudge, and a tray of brownies. And somehow those brownies were still bothering the other people involved years later. A few years ago, someone was placed in a group with other students for a school project, And pretty much from the beginning, they just didn't get along. The other students were really passionate about vegetarianism and sustainability, which wasn't a problem by itself. The problem was that almost every conversation seemed to turn into some kind of lecture. They'd make little comments about what this person ate, how they traveled, or basically any choice they didn't agree with. Things like, I could never be okay with eating a ham sandwich, or you really should have cycled instead of driving. None of those comments were especially awful on their own, but after hearing them constantly, they started getting pretty irritating. Eventually, the teammates decided they wanted to visit several farmers and interview them about sustainable agriculture. It sounded interesting in theory, but it would have taken several days, and their schedule was already packed. The person telling the story also didn't think the visits would contribute much to the actual project. Most of the information they needed could have been found through normal research without turning it into an entire field trip. So they told the others they were completely free to go, but they wouldn't be joining them. They explained that they were already doing more than their share of the work and didn't want to spend several days on something that probably wouldn't make much difference to the final result. Surprisingly, the teammates seemed fine with that. They left the following week and spent around 3 full days visiting different farms. Meanwhile, the person who stayed behind finished most of the actual research. And when the final report came together, all of those farm visits ended up becoming little more than a footnote, which was pretty much exactly what they had expected. They were annoyed that the others had disappeared for several days while most of the important work was left behind. But the project was almost finished, and they didn't feel like starting another argument that close to the end. So they let it go, mostly. As the project was wrapping up, the group decided to have a potluck. Everyone was supposed to bring something homemade, and the person telling the story happened to have an incredible brownie recipe. Apparently, these brownies were extremely moist, really rich, and so good that every brownie they'd tried afterward had been a disappointment. So they made an entire tray and brought it along. And of course, the brownies were a huge success. Everyone went back for seconds, and the entire tray was gone before the end of the day. Then people started asking questions. What was in them? How were they made? And most importantly, could they please have the recipe? Which must have been very satisfying after weeks of unwanted advice and doing most of the actual work. The person smiled and promised they'd send the recipe later. But privately, they'd already decided that was never going to happen. Whenever someone asked about it again, there was always a new excuse. They forgot. They'd send it that evening. They were busy and would look for it later, but somehow the recipe never arrived. Eventually, the project ended. They got good grades. Everyone went their separate ways, and that should have been the end of the story. Except, even years later, one of the former group members would occasionally send a message asking for the brownie recipe, and every single time, they were ignored. Years later, those brownies were apparently unforgettable. Honestly, this might be one of the most harmless forms of petty revenge I've ever heard. Nobody's food was ruined. Nobody got embarrassed or publicly humiliated. They were simply given the best brownies of their lives once, and then denied the ability to ever recreate them. And I think the fact that they were still asking for the recipe years later somehow makes it even funnier. The person who wrote the story said they felt satisfied knowing those teammates would probably never find another brownie that tasted quite as good. And after weeks of lectures, unnecessary field trips, and being left with most of the real work, they considered that a fair punishment. Honestly, I'm not sure I could hold on to a brownie grudge for that many years, but I do respect the commitment. What about you? Would you have eventually shared the recipe or taken it with you to the grave? Okay. The next story is called, Am I the A-hole for leaving my boyfriend birthday dinner after his mom took my seat? Imagine showing up to your boyfriend's birthday dinner, only for his mother to decide that the funniest possible joke would be taking your seat next to him. Everyone at the table laughed, her boyfriend included, and when she eventually decided to leave, somehow she became the person who had ruined the evening. The woman who posted this had been dating her boyfriend, Matt, for almost 2 years. She was 25, Matt was 27, and according to her, the relationship itself had been going pretty well. The biggest problem had always been his mother. She was extremely close to Matt and seemed to have a hard time accepting that another woman was becoming important in his life. Whenever the poster tried to make plans with him, his mother would suddenly need his help with something. She'd also make little passive-aggressive comments, like joking that she hoped her son wouldn't forget about her now that he had some girl taking up all of his time. The poster had always tried to ignore it and keep the peace, but it was becoming pretty obvious that his mother didn't really respect her. Then Matt's birthday came around. He invited his girlfriend to a nice restaurant with the rest of his family. She dressed up, brought him a gift she knew he'd love, and was genuinely looking forward to spending the evening with him. When everyone arrived, she noticed that his mother had placed herself in the seat directly beside him. That was slightly awkward, but there was another empty chair on his other side, so she sat there instead. At first, she thought that would be the end of it, but just before they were about to order, Matt's mother suddenly announced that she had an idea. She said they should see how Matt handled a little separation from his girlfriend. Then she stood up, pointed toward a seat farther down the table, and told the poster to move so she could sit between them. Everyone at the table started laughing. Matt laughed too, and instead of telling his mother to stop, he actually motioned for his girlfriend to move. She was completely stunned, but she didn't want to cause a scene at his birthday dinner, so she quietly picked up her things and moved farther down the table. For the next several minutes, she sat there feeling embarrassed while his mother leaned across Matt and behaved as though she were his date. Nobody seemed to notice how uncomfortable she was, or maybe they noticed and simply didn't care. Either way, the entire thing made her feel small and humiliated. After about 5 minutes, she realized she didn't want to sit through the rest of the evening pretending that everything was fine. So she stood up, picked up her bag, and calmly told Matt that she was going to head home. She wished him a happy birthday and left the restaurant. She didn't yell, she didn't argue with his mother, she simply removed herself from the situation. And honestly, considering how embarrassed she felt, leaving quietly was probably the least dramatic option available. Matt started messaging her later that night, but instead of asking why she was hurt or apologizing for laughing along with his mother, he accused her of completely overreacting. He said she'd embarrassed him in front of his family and that she clearly couldn't take a joke. His mother also sent her a message saying she was sorry that the poster was so sensitive, which isn't really an apology. It's basically another way of saying, I didn't do anything wrong, your reaction is the problem. Matt then stopped speaking to her and said he wouldn't continue the conversation until she apologized. And because it had been his birthday dinner, she started wondering whether she really had handled the situation badly. Maybe she should have stayed. Maybe she should have laughed along. Maybe walking out had made the evening more dramatic than it needed to be. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that this wasn't only about one uncomfortable joke. It was part of a much longer pattern involving his mother. She later clarified that his mother had done plenty of smaller things like this throughout their relationship. The comments, the interruptions, the constant need to remind everyone that she came first in Matt's life. And every time it happened, the poster was expected to ignore it for the sake of keeping everyone happy. The problem was that Matt never seemed willing to admit that his mother's behavior was inappropriate. Even now, he seemed more upset that his girlfriend had left the restaurant than he was about the reason she'd felt the need to leave. After 2 days of silence, she decided she was done waiting for him to understand. She gathered his belongings and took them back to his house. She still tried to have one final conversation with him, hoping he might finally acknowledge how humiliating the dinner had been. But Matt continued defending his mother. He insisted she hadn't meant any harm, told his girlfriend to calm down, and said she was being dramatic. At that point, the poster realized the conversation wasn't going anywhere. She told him that if his mother was so perfect and the two of them understood each other's humor so well, then maybe he should just date her instead. And with that, she ended the relationship. It wasn't really the chair that ended things. It was the fact that when his mother deliberately embarrassed his girlfriend, Matt joined in. And even afterward, when he had time to think about it, he was still more interested in defending his mother than understanding why his girlfriend was hurt. All right, so the author is definitely not an a-hole. I don't think she left the restaurant because she couldn't take a joke. A joke is supposed to be funny for more than just the people making it. In this case, the entire joke seemed to be that she was being pushed out of her own place beside her boyfriend. and the bigger issue was Matt's reaction. He didn't have to start an argument with his mother in the middle of dinner. He could have simply said, "No, she's fine where she is," and ended the whole situation in a few seconds. Instead, he laughed and told his girlfriend to move. Then he expected her to apologize for feeling humiliated. So while ending a 2-year relationship over one chair might sound extreme, that clearly wasn't what actually happened. The chair just made the pattern impossible to ignore. But what do you think? Was leaving the dinner the right decision, or should she have waited and confronted him privately afterward? And would you have ended the relationship after that final conversation? All right, I think we need something a little more petty after that. The next story is about a man who watched one of his wife's friends insult her after she'd spent 3 days trying to be a good wedding guest. He didn't confront the friend. He didn't start an argument. Instead, he decided to return the favor, one very polite compliment at a time, and apparently he's been committed to this plan for years. A couple of years earlier, one of his wife's friends had gotten married, but this wasn't just a ceremony followed by a reception. The bride had planned an entire 3-day event with several meals, 2 separate ceremonies, and a different dress code for practically every part of the weekend. The husband and his wife weren't really party people, but they wanted to be supportive, so they made an effort to participate in as much as they could. They packed all the outfits, followed the schedule, and tried to be good guests. On the first day, there was a dinner that didn't even begin until 9 at night. Then at 10, a bus was supposed to take everyone out dancing. The couple joined everyone for dinner, but because it was a weekday, they told the bride they wouldn't be able to stay for the dancing afterward. At the time, that didn't seem like a big deal. But during brunch the next morning, the bride made a point of telling them how much fun everyone had had. She talked about how even the older guests and the children had managed to join in. And while she said it, she gave the wife this very pointed little smile, which definitely sounds less like sharing a fun memory and more like making sure someone knows they disappointed you. That same day, the guests went through 2 different ceremonies, more traveling, more socializing, more changing clothes, and by the end of it, the couple was exhausted. Still, they continued showing up because they cared about the bride and wanted to support her. The final event was another brunch on the 3rd morning. So once again, they woke up early. The wife got dressed in her 4th outfit of the weekend, did her hair and makeup again, and the 2 of them made their way to brunch. When they arrived, the bride greeted them and looked directly at the wife. Then, in a very judgmental tone, she said, "Oh, hi. Wow. You look comfy. Not, you look nice, or I'm glad you made it. Just, you look comfy." And according to the husband, the way she said it made the message pretty clear. She was implying that his wife hadn't made enough effort. His wife tried to brush it off. She said the bride had probably just been stressed from organizing such a huge wedding weekend, and she didn't want one rude comment to become a bigger issue. The husband, however, did not forget it. From his perspective, his wife had spent 3 days dressing up, following complicated plans, and showing up to event after event, and the bride had still found a way to make her feel like she wasn't trying hard enough. By the way, sorry to interrupt, but this mountain looks so good that I thought I would build a new temporary home here. There are also different biomes nearby, so it could be interesting. But back to it, the husband didn't say anything at the wedding. He didn't confront the bride afterward either. He simply decided that from then on, whenever he saw her at a gathering, he would give her the same kind of compliment she had given his wife. Something that sounded friendly at first, but became increasingly insulting the longer you thought about it. For example, he'd tell her, "I love how you don't care about vanity. You just go with the natural look and don't worry about what anyone thinks." Or he'd look at her outfit and say, "You look super comfortable." Apparently he's used different versions of that one several times, and when she arrived late to something, he told her, "I wish I could have your attitude about arriving whenever. I always feel like I have to be on time." They're all technically compliments, just very carefully designed ones. According to him, the best part is watching her face afterward. Every time he says something, she pauses for a moment. You can almost see her trying to decide whether he's being genuinely friendly or whether she's just been insulted. And because the words themselves sound positive, it's difficult for her to confront him without seeming overly sensitive, which is admittedly very calculated. He has clearly put more thought into this than most people put into resolving the original problem. The wedding happened years ago, but he says he's still doing it. His plan is to continue until this woman is no longer part of their lives or until one of them is gone, which is an absolutely unhinged level of commitment to the phrase, "You look comfy." After sharing the story, he received hundreds of suggestions for new backhanded compliments. And instead of deciding that maybe the joke had gone far enough, he started saving his favorites in a note on his phone. So apparently this plan isn't slowing down anytime soon. If anything, the internet has now given him additional material. I'll be honest, I have mixed feelings about this one. The bride's comment was definitely rude, especially after his wife had spent an entire weekend trying to participate in everything, and I understand why he felt protective of her. There's also something undeniably funny about giving someone the exact same kind of compliment they once used against somebody else, but carrying it on for several years is a lot. At some point, the revenge probably takes more energy than the original insult ever deserved. Still, I have to respect the consistency. He chose an extremely specific form of pettiness, and he has remained completely dedicated to it. What do you think? Is this harmless, well-deserved revenge? Or should he have let the comfy comment go a long time ago? And what's the most backhanded compliment you've ever received? I think that's where we'll leave the stories for today. We ended up traveling pretty far from our little cave home this time. We crossed the ocean, made our way through a swamp, found a witch's hut. Although sadly, there was no black cat anywhere, and eventually reached this mountain. I've started building us a new little home up here, but I didn't quite manage to finish it today. So I guess that's where we'll pick things up next time. Thank you so much for spending some time with me. I hope this gave you a cozy place to relax, study, get some work done, or maybe even fall asleep. And if you enjoyed hanging out, feel free to leave a like or subscribe. It's completely optional, but it really does mean a lot. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one. Until then, good night or have a lovely rest of your day.